What is going on, everybody? This is David with Acquire and Monetize. I hope everybody is doing well, especially after Thanksgiving. I hope everybody had some good family time. If you could just all do me a favor, if you would, do me a favor and just write in the chat if you guys can hear me okay, if everybody can hear. Neil says no sound. Okay, JM, great. All right, awesome. Good to see you, Robert. Hey, Glenn, how's it going? Hey, Neil. Awesome, Leo. Hey, Jared, what's going on? Glad to have everybody here. So we are here with the man, the myth, Mr. Todd Brown. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, man. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you. And today we've got a really, really awesome topic. We're going to talk about the intensification sequence. And Todd, why don't you just, why don't we just dive right in? Why don't you let everybody know what the intensification sequence is and tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, very cool. So this is a cool session. This is going to be really simple. I'm going to show you some examples in just a second. And then, of course, if you've got any questions, feel free to fire them away. We're going to take a bunch of time or whatever time necessary in the end to answer your questions. So like David said, this is all about what we call internally at MFA the intensification sequence. And what this sequence is all about is this is an email sequence that we typically tag on at the end of every campaign, and we use this sequence as a way of boosting sales. So let me I put together some slides for you. So I want you to think of it like this. So regardless of what type of marketing campaign model you are using, whether you're using a multi-part video sequence, whether you're using a simple video sales letter, whether you're using an evergreen webinar, a live webinar, regardless, what happens is at some point in your follow-up, you are following up with individuals that have seen the offer. So they've either watched the final sales video in a multi-part video sequence, or they've watched your VSL and they've heard your offer, and now you're going to follow up with those folks. So what you're looking at here is a representation of the end of a campaign. So I want you to imagine, like I said, that they've watched your VSL, they've watched your sales video, they've read your long form sales letter. Well, the first thing that we do in all of our campaigns is we plug folks into an offer follow-up sequence. This is a sequence that follows up with them about the offer. I'm going to show you what we typically do. I'm going to break it down for you in just a second. And then if a prospect doesn't buy after the offer follow-up sequence, they then immediately go into what we call the intensification sequence. So what I wanted to do for you first is I want to give you a little insight into how we structure the typical offer follow-up sequence. What our emails are typically focusing on in the offer follow-up, and then we'll break down the simple 5P formula or framework that we use during the intensification sequence. So with the offer follow-up sequence, the very first email that we send out focuses on the offer. It focuses on the features and the benefits, the risk reversal. It just reminds them really of the offer and the benefits of the offer. Very simple, very straightforward email. 24 hours later, and typically what we do, depending on the email autoresponder or the CRM that you're using, it might work a little differently for you. We use internally Infusionsoft. I've used Infusionsoft for, my gosh, well over a decade now. And so inside of Infusionsoft, we're able to set our emails to go out 24 hours later, not just a day later. And I want you to understand the nuance there. So the reason why we set in, let's say somebody opts in, right, for a campaign, a particular campaign. Well, we trigger the follow-up email the next day, 24 hours later, which means that they're receiving the email at the same time that they opted in. Rather than just sending it the next day at whatever time, we trigger it 24 hours later, so we know that we're delivering the email at the time that they were online and opted in to begin with. This email, very simple, the offer. recaps the offer. The next email that we send out 24 hours later focuses on the big promise or the big payoff, the big transformation, the main reason why a prospect would be purchasing your product or service. What's the main thing that they want? What's the outcome that they want? What's the big transformation, the big change? What's the kind of the after picture that they're looking for, right? You need to recognize that your prospects are, they're dealing with something right now. They're dealing with a situation. They're either dealing with some sort of pain or problem or issue, or there's an obstacle standing in their way from getting the result that they want. It's our job in our marketing to show them how, with your offer, they can go from where they are today to where they ultimately want to be, right? That's the today picture, the now picture, and then the after picture. This second email in the offer follow-up sequence focuses on that big payoff. 24 hours later, we send another email. This email takes the opposite approach, and this focuses on the removal of the problem. So you know, as marketers, that people are motivated generally by two things. They're motivated by the kind of the achievement of pleasure, if you will, right? The experience of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. Email number 2 focuses on the achievement of pleasure, that gain, if you will. Email number 3 focuses on the problem, and it kind of, we use this, if you really want to break it down, we use the problem, agitate, solve. So it focuses on the problem that they're dealing with right now, it agitates that problem, and then it solves the problem by with a call to action to take advantage of the offer. So email 1, the offer, right, and the benefits of the offer. Email number 2, the big payoff transformation. Email number 3 is the removal of the problem, agitate, solve. And then the fourth email that we send out as part of the offer follow-up sequence is typically an FAQ, and typically we'll focus on 3 questions. Now, I want to give you a little nuance here, even though I'm just sharing this with you just to give you some context, right? This has nothing to do yet with the intensification sequence, but I want to give you some context. In this email, in the FAQ email, we typically, like I said, answer 3 questions. The 3 questions that we focus on, we try to choose 3 questions that are really presuppositions. And what I mean by that is that we're addressing questions that allow us to focus on a benefit and payoff. Meaning, like, for example, one of the questions that in some shape or form that we usually ask and answer in this FAQ email has something to do with how fast can I expect to see results? Right? So if you're selling a product on how to grow a big, gorgeous, lush green lawn, one of the questions that we would ask and answer in this email is like, well, how quickly will my lawn, how quickly will my lawn become, full and thick and green? Right? That is a presuppositional question because it presupposes that their lawn will grow long and thick and lush and green. Right? And so, in essence, we're not saying, will this work for me? We're addressing how quickly it will work for them. Right? Oftentimes when we include a powerful risk reversal, a powerful guarantee, we'll ask some sort of question related to the guarantee, like, can I really get my money back anytime? Can I really download everything or use everything and still get my money back? Right? And so we're asking a question that allows us to focus on a benefit, a payoff. These 4 emails make up our typical offer follow-up sequence. Now, if a prospect doesn't respond after this or as they're going through this, and of course, anytime a prospect buys, they get removed from this sequence, right, and they get put into the customer thank you sequence. But immediately after the offer follow-up sequence, that's when we plug folks into the intensification sequence. And the way that I want you to think of the intensification sequence is it simply intensifies the offer and intensifies the desire for the offer. That's all it's doing. We're intensifying the offer and intensifying the desire for the offer. And in this intensification sequence, we usually use the 5P framework. Now, some of you might only use 4Ps, and I'll explain that in just a second. The first email that we send out is proof, and I'm going to show you examples of these in just a second. First email that we send out is proof. It tells the story of a successful customer. It shows that before and after journey. So it takes a prospect, right? It takes a particular individual that used your product or service, and it shows their journey. Proof, number one. Number two is what I call prize. And here is where we're sweetening the offer. This is typically where we add in an additional bonus. And there are fancy ways of doing this based on segmentation, which I'll show you in just a second. But here, we're sweetening the offer. Proof, prize, then we go back to proof. And we tell another story of a successful customer. Now, when possible, right, proof is one of those, like, you know, Gary Benzavenga, one of the greatest, most successful copywriters of all time, talked about proof as the foundation of every great marketing campaign. And I really agree. I've said many times before to Damien, our COO at MFA, that when you have enough proof, enough diverse proof, enough proof of various individuals starting at various different points in their customer journey, you really can make a claim and just offer proof, and that is all you need, right, when you have enough great proof. And so we focus on two different proof points here in the intensification sequence. And the proof points that you're looking for here are customer journey stories, right? Customer journey stories. And ideally, you're not telling the same story twice, meaning you're not like, you know, the first story varies slightly from the second story. The second story might be of a man when the first one was of a woman. The first one might be somebody young. The second one you want to be old, right? The first person had one obstacle. The second person had a different obstacle. So you're attacking the proof from a different point of view. The key here is, when possible, you want to convey a story. The fourth P is what we call payments. Now this is, you're going to only use this for higher end products. This is really, in a nutshell, when we introduce a payment plan. So if you are selling a whatever is considered a high end, even really a mid-tier price product in your marketplace, if you have not rolled out a payment plan during the offer follow-up sequence portion, or if you haven't rolled out a payment plan when you presented the offer, right? If you have not rolled out a payment plan during the offer, you would be crazy not to include a payment plan as part of the intensification sequence. The reality is, like, even if you were selling something for, and again, every market is different in terms of what's considered mid-tier, what's considered high-end pricing, but you'd be crazy not to even take something that's $100 and give them the opportunity to pay it over payments, right? It's amazing how today, how people, it's not the total price that most people look at, it's the individual payments. And so you'd be crazy really not to offer a payment plan. We almost always offer some kind of payment plan. Now, most of the time when we offer a payment plan, the total of the payment plan is higher than the individual pay. We want to make sure always that we're rewarding our best customers, the customers that take advantage of our offers right away, the ones that choose to pay in full. We want to give them a reward, and usually that reward is some discount, if you will, off of the total value of the payment plan. So that is the fourth email in the intensification sequence when it's appropriate. And the final part of the intensification sequence is what we call push. And this is where we incorporate a deadline. And as you'll see in just a second, the push phase of the intensification sequence is made up of multiple emails that get sent out in the last 24 hours. You know, you always, when possible, and there's really no time where it's not possible, you want to incorporate a deadline. You need to give people a reason for responding now. Remember that, especially online where there's so much noise and so much activity, that delay is the death of the sale. Delay is the death of the sale. And if there's a reason for somebody to delay their purchase, they're going to jump at that. People are looking for an opportunity to, or a reason to delay making a purchase. And so we incorporate in the intensification sequence a deadline where the offer gets pulled. Now, a couple of little nuances, and if you've got some questions about this, we can definitely address your specifics. But oftentimes, let's say the deadline, let's say you want to have a deadline, but the deadline is, you're not going to pull the product from the market, right? It's like the typical IM maneuver is I'm pulling the product off of the market. Well, you know, for most of the time, that's a little bit crazy to do that, right? Where you're not giving them the opportunity to buy. And so typically what we will do is we will tie that deadline to either the payment plan, if we're using a payment plan, and or the additional bonus. So if you don't want to have to pull the offer from the market, you can still use a deadline, and that deadline is tied to the payment plan offer with the extra bonus. If you're not using a payment plan, you can still use the deadline for the offer that includes the extra bonus. Now, let me throw in another little nuance here for you. If you're not going to use the payment plan, if you're selling a lower ticket item, for example, and you're not going to use a payment plan, I would definitely recommend that you add in a second additional bonus, meaning that email number 4, instead of talking about the payment plan, talks about extra bonus number 2. So in that case, your intensification sequence would be proof, prize, push. And the reason why you want to do that when you don't have a payment plan is because you want to make sure that there is enough value in the offer that's tied to the deadline, right? So let me say that again. You want to make sure that there is enough value in the offer that's tied with the deadline. If you're going to use an extra bonus and a payment plan, that's good. If you're going to use a 2 extra bonuses and the deadline, that's also good. So let me give you some simple examples, and this is really straightforward, and then I'll tell you the tool that we use in just a second to do this. So this is an example of an email that we sent out as proof. In here I included a screenshot of from Graham English talking about how he was getting back $6 for every $1 that he put into his funnel using the 6-figure funnel formula, right? And this is, you know, we've been using this intensification sequence for years now. So this is, I don't even know how many years old, 4 years old, something like that. This is another example of this is a newer email from I think this is from the email sequence that promotes from the intensification sequence within the E5 camp, right? And so it tells a story. Ed had a product that he struggled to sell for almost a year, so he decided enough was enough, and he went through the E5 camp masterclass. And just 13 days after learning the E5 camp method, sent me this message on Facebook. His very first marketing campaign using the E5 camp method, and he generated over $58,000 in recurring monthly income. So cool, right? And then it goes on to plug the offer. Simple, right? But you're offering proof, a proof point via a story. Underneath the email on the left, I went into Graham's story a little bit more. Next, email number 2 is prize. Right? This is where you offer an additional bonus. And there are 2 ways that you can do this. One a little bit more advanced than the other. First, let's start with, I'll give you the simple way. The simple way is just that you have a bonus that is added to the offer for everybody, meaning it is it's an extra something that everybody gets. There's no segmentation. It's an email that's just triggered for everybody, right? Then you've got a little bit more advanced method, and the advanced method is where you are actually designing bonuses that you're going to use to intensify the offer that are specific to different segments. So this is an example that was taken from our multi-part video sequence campaign for the E5 Camp Masterclass, and this is In that campaign, we use simple segmentation on the front. So when somebody goes to the opt-in page and they go to opt-in, we ask a simple question of something like what best describes your business, and then there are three choices. One is I'm just getting started, I don't have a funnel right now or a campaign right now. Another one is I've done some marketing but I've struggled a little bit to make something work. And another one is, I'm acquiring customers and I'm now ready to scale. And so what you can see here are screenshots of 3 different emails that went out to those 3 different segments. So the first email on the left, you could see we put together a bonus that is perfect for people that have a sales funnel set up right now that's not producing significant or any sales. This next email went out to the people that were in that first segment or that first bucket, as my buddy Ryan Levesque would call it, right? It's perfect for you if you're just getting started online. And then we put together a third bonus, which was for the people that were ready to scale their business big. Now, one thing that I want to point out, just a little behind the scenes thing, is that I give all 3 of these bonuses to everybody. Meaning that, like, the people that are in this segment, they'll still get these bonuses. We just don't talk about it. These become sort of unadvertised extra goodies for this person over here. So it's a way for us to exceed their expectations, to over-deliver value, right? And so we're focusing on this one bonus because it's most appropriate to their needs, but they're still getting access to these other 2. Just like these people we're focusing on this bonus, but they're still getting access to these 2, and same over here. So everybody gets rewarded with the same thing. It's not like we're giving a better bonus to one segment than the other. Everybody is getting access to all of these. It's just that we're focusing in this advanced approach. We're focusing on the particular bonus for them. This is very, very easy to do. Like I said, especially if you're segmenting on the front or you're doing any kind of segmenting with your list. Even not on the front. If you're not doing any segmenting whatsoever, not a big deal. You would just send out one email with an extra bonus to intensify the offer. One other thing that I would share with you is this, and I'm just a big believer in, like, don't throw together bonuses when you're trying to sweeten an offer, when you're trying to intensify an offer. Fact of the matter really is, don't just throw together bonuses when you are putting together your offer. Bonuses are an incredibly powerful tool to boost conversions, and you want to make sure that you are thinking through the bonuses. Like, I put as much time, energy, and effort into thinking through the bonuses as I do the core of the main product. Remember that an offer, which is really what it is that you are marketing in a campaign. It's really what you're presenting in a campaign. The offer is what it is that you are really, quote unquote, selling the prospect on. The product itself is only one piece of the offer, right? The price is another piece. The terms are another piece. The bonuses are another piece. The risk reversal is another piece. And when I'm putting together an offer, I'm thinking through each individual piece. I'm thinking through what are the deliverables, and are the deliverables, the features, the advantages, the benefits of the main product, are they superior to what else is being offered out there? Are the deliverables, the features, the advantages, and the benefits of those, are they filling in gaps in the marketplace? But then I take the same approach when I think through the bonuses. What bonuses do I need to add to this that will not only fill in gaps that people may have, will not only overcome potential objections, right, but will be wildly valuable? What bonuses could I add that would make people say, I want to pay for this just to get access to these bonuses, right? That's the same. You need to take that same mentality with your main offer as well as when you are intensifying the offer with an extra bonus or 2 extra bonuses. And as a heads up, for those of you that have been through the E5 Camp Masterclass and use the E5 Camp method, you know that I always begin with the offer. Right? I always start, before I write a piece of copy, before I write a headline, before I do any of that, I think through the offer. right? And based on what the offer is, right, then I decide like what's the best model to use, right? Because is it a high ticket offer? Is it a soft offer, like pay nothing today, pay in 30 days? Is it a hard offer, right? I think through, and I'll decide in advance what I want the bonuses to be as part of the offer, of course, and what I want to include in the intensification sequence as a bonus or two bonuses. And so you need to take the same approach. Remember, let me say this again, and you've heard, those of you that have been around for any significant length of time, you've heard me say this time and time again. For those of you that this is your first training with me, your first A&M training, is this, that don't ever underestimate the task at hand. David has heard me say that dozens of times. My team has heard me say that dozens of times. Never underestimate the task at hand. The key is not simply having a bonus, right? Like what makes it effective is not simply having a bonus. It's not the act of offering a bonus. It's what is being offered and how good is it? How valuable is it? What will it do for your prospects? That's how you have to think about this when you're putting together your main offer and when you are intensifying the offer. And so this is an example of adding in an extra bonus. Then number 3 in the intensification sequence is proof. This is an email from, I think, one of the follow-up sequences for the E5 Camp Masterclass. Now here, and I try to do this, here I introduce not only a story of a success story, but I introduce another medium of communication. So in this email, and even in this email, this was just an email, right, with screenshots of, on the left of a Facebook comment, on the right a Facebook message that was sent to me. Over here, I'm introducing a video. And so we had put together a video. This is, you can see in the picture, David and Rory Stern, right? And so this was, there was an extra video that did some kind of additional, I don't want to say selling, but it really just told Rory's story. You could see, right, let me introduce you to Rory Stern. He's been on quite the entrepreneurial journey. I was a wannabe entrepreneur, buying lots of products but not implementing much, was how Rory described himself. He was involved in online marketing as a consumer, on lots of email lists and participating in a handful of Facebook groups, but he was seeing little money coming in, just a couple of sales a week. Then Rory learned about the E5 Camp method by going through the same video series you just went through. Okay, so this was from the video series. And he decided to take the plunge and enroll. Today, using what he learned in the E5 Camp Masterclass, Rory brings in over $4,000 a day, over $1 million a year. And so you see how this told a different story. This over here was just about the story underneath here of launching a new campaign and getting $6 back for every $1 put in. This was a story about, this person struggling. And the reason why this is blurred out is just because this is a popular marketer. And so, so I didn't want to, this is somebody you would know. But he had a product, right? He was struggling to sell the product for a year, and then did a webinar and generated, 58 grand in recurring monthly income. This is a story of, right? Like, this is a story of the typical prospect that you can see, right? Right? He considered himself a wannabe entrepreneur. He's involved in lots of groups, on lots of emails, blah, blah, blah. Different story, different angle. Right? And so that is, that's proof. Another thing, just to point this out for what it's worth to you guys, you'll notice, and I don't always do this, but you'll notice how this video has a click here to start button. Like, this is an image, obviously a screenshot from the video with a button down here. And you'll notice that this is different from what most people do when they put a clickable video screenshot in there. I like to change things up. You've heard me talk before, if you've been on any trainings, about differentiation. I don't always want stuff to look the same. In fact, I never want it to look the same. And so I try to do little things that make it look different. Just even having the button down here in the lower thirds, having the button say click here to start rather than just a circular, YouTube looking image. And so those are things to think about. Most importantly, you see the story from before to after. Next is an example of a payment plan sequence. I'm going to show you how we do this in just a second. When we do a payment plan, this was an example of how this payment plan we attached to the deadline. So we combined in this intensification sequence, we introduced a new payment plan, and we tied it to a deadline. We began to tie it to the push sequence, or the push portion of this sequence. When we do a deadline, and I'm going to show you the tool that we use in just a second. When we do a deadline, we do a real deadline that is hard-coded for each prospect, each individual, meaning so that if we run this payment plan for 3 days, let's say, right, when somebody starts this section of the campaign, an actual date will be put into their record, into their contact record. It'll be pre-populated over here, the date, and this is dynamically done for each person. And then after this date, they will not be able to take advantage of the offer, meaning that we're not just using some random countdown timer. We're not just, right, like if they come back to this 3 months later and click on this, it expires. It expires on the date, and we use a pretty simple tool to do this. But this is an example of the first email that went out, right, over the last few days. So here's the deal. Until X date, you can get started for just $169. You still get immediate access to everything. You can take an entire month and go through it. If you love the results, you'll be billed just if you're not thrilled, blah, blah, blah. This opportunity to get started is only available until this date, same date as up here. And this is just an example of another email that went out the next day. And so you can see how it's fairly similar, just focused on the payment plan. And then we go into the push. And the push is really the last day. On the last day, you want to send out multiple emails. We usually send out 4 emails on just the last day. So this is also from the E5 Camp Masterclass. This is just the lead portion of the email, right? This is this was, I think, this is sent out the morning of. This one is an 8-hour reminder. I'll show you the tool that we use for this. When this email goes out, there's a countdown timer in here. And then when it expires, it automatically changes the image. So morning, 8-hour reminder. This is a 4-hour warning, and then this is a 59 minutes. We typically close our offers at midnight Pacific time. So so morning, 8 hours, 4 hours, and then an hour left. The tool that we use to do this is Deadline Funnel. I don't own this. This is from my buddy. This is from my buddy Jack Bourne. This is a great tool because what this tool allows you to do, and I don't have any kind of affiliate link, you could just go to Deadline Funnel, I think .io or deadlinefunnel.com. What I love about this tool, and there's lots of different countdown tools that we use or that you can use, but what I love about this is that it allows you to coordinate a countdown timer on your or in your emails with the same countdown timer on a web page. And what this allows us to do is this allows us to create real deadlines for our contacts, meaning where most people, they have a simple countdown timer on a web page, but if you go to a different computer or you go on a different device, or you're smart enough to clear your cookies, you can still access the same thing. With Deadline Funnel, this allows us to have real deadlines with integrity, meaning that when we say it expires on a certain date, it expires on a certain date. See, with the typical countdown timer, what happens is if somebody doesn't click on the link and go to the page, it doesn't begin. Meaning if you send out an email and you say this expires tomorrow night and you have an evergreen campaign, and they don't click on the link for a week later, when they click on the link a week later, the countdown timer will then begin. What Deadline Funnel allows you to do is Deadline Funnel allows you to set a deadline on a specific date dynamically for each person, and whether they click on the link or not, it's counting down behind the scenes. So when you say, right, on Wednesday this expires, and then like tomorrow you say tomorrow this expires, and then Wednesday when you say this expires, even if they don't click on the link, if they try to go and access that page on Thursday, it's expired. If they switch devices, it's expired. If they clear their cookies, it's expired. And so for me, that just feels great from an integrity perspective. And so that is the tool that we use. And so there you go. That is just a little bit over 30 minutes to explain this to you. That is the type of sequence that we use at the end of almost every single campaign. And so, David, with that, let's take whatever questions there may be.
Awesome. So we have our first question here from Carl. And just so everybody knows, the questions are going to be based on what Todd just presented with regards, to this presentation here. So the first question is, Todd, if the offer sequence is 4 emails and the intensification is 5 emails, over how many days will these need to go out?
They'll go out consecutively. So in other words, they'll go out consecutively. So if you send 4 emails as part of the offer sequence and then you send 5 emails as part of the intensification sequence, you're going out over 9 days.
Very cool. All right.
It's a thing, David, that most people they give up on their leads way too early. Right, they give up on their leads way too early. Like they have this mindset that's like, I don't pressure
my audience.
Yeah, and it's not like, look, it is, you got to understand that, right? Like if you have a product, if you have an offer that you believe is in the best interest of your audience, which hopefully every offer that everybody on here is putting out, they feel that way about, well, then you do them a disservice by not driving them to respond. Like when I look at the E5 Camp Masterclass, or when I look at A&M for that matter, it pains me inside to think of somebody not taking advantage of the offer because I know that they're not going to get the benefits that they could get. And so I'm not going to give up on them. I'm not going to give up on them, right? I would rather go the distance and get the additional people that we get to respond and risk pissing off the others that aren't going to respond to soften it up and end up not being able to deliver value to the maximum number of people I can. And so most marketers give up way too early on their leads.
That's very well said, man. I appreciate that. So Carl was actually he was ahead of us.
One other thing. I'm sorry. And that the subtle point that I want you to get, and I've talked about this before, but is that you'll notice in the intensification sequence that you've got something new to share. So the thing that I don't want you to misunderstand is we're not simply following up for 9 days, just hammering them about the offer, right? Like we're not following up like, did you get it? Did you get it? Did you get it? Did you get it? In the intensification sequence, we're introducing 2 new things of value. We're either introducing a new bonus and a payment plan, or we're introducing 2 new bonuses. So in essence, you've got something new to announce. Right? And then, of course, you could really say that you're announcing a third thing, which is a deadline. And so you've got a reason to reach out to them. We're not simply hammering them over and over about the same thing.
Very cool. Yeah, I was going to say that Carl was ahead of you here, Todd, because he was asking about deadline funnels early on, if we could use deadline funnel for the webinar. So for sure he was on it. Neil said his question is, what if you don't have a deadline for your product? In my case, a hedge fund that can be bought at all times, and where we don't want to orchestrate false urgency or peer pushing anyway. Of course, an argument could be made that the sooner you invest, the better your long-term outcome. But I would love to hear what you would do in a situation like this.
Yeah, so I'm also a big believer. I hate the whole fake, scarcity and urgency, and whatnot. And so there's a couple things. So well, let me take a step back and say this first, that you remember that, and I said this earlier, and this is a subtle thing, but if you think about this should change things for each and every one of you, that remember, the offer is not just the product. you can sell or market and sell the same product over and over and over every day for an entire 12 months, and you can change the offer 12 times throughout the year. You can have the same product with a different offer each month, right? Because remember, the product, the hedge fund, the bag of fertilizer, the service that you're offering is only one part of the offer. You can change up the terms. You can add in a bonus. You can sweeten the offer. So what the offer is today might not be the same offer that it is next month or next week for that matter. And so the deadline is not tied to the product, it's tied to the offer. So any offer can have a deadline, right? That doesn't mean that at the end of the deadline that you have to pull the product and not offer the product. It just means that the offer that you put together is expired, right? So we could sell the E5 camp, we could sell acquire and monetize every day if we wanted, and we could change the offer with a different bonus, right? We could pull out, maybe they're not allowed to attend these, right, these calls or get access to these trainings, blah, blah, blah. So you can tie the deadline to the offer, not necessarily the product, and you can still sell the product over and over and over. You could also have the product itself with no bonuses available 24/7 to be purchased, and then you have the ability to make a special offer with additional bonuses and additional perks that is tied to a deadline. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I would say is that the time when you can get away with not having a deadline for the urgency, and I don't even know if I would say there really should always be a deadline, but the thing that you can do is you can build urgency like he was saying here, David. You could build urgency into the solution, into the alleviation of the problem, meaning the urgency comes into play with, like, if it, like let's say with a hedge fund hypothetically, right, the market is poised for extreme growth based on, right, the Fed is the Fed is making a change, Janet Yellen is out the door, blah, blah, blah. And so there's a reason for them to get in the hedge fund now based on what's going on in the market, and it's not necessarily tied to a deadline. But you have to give a reason to respond now. Remember, delay is the death of the sale. There either needs to be urgency built into solving the problem, taking advantage of some circumstance, or there needs to be urgency with some sort of deadline.
Very cool, man. And I think everybody should write that down, just like I just did. Todd, delay is the death of the sale. I appreciate that. So Leo was asking, I think, when we were talking about the bonus, and I'm not sure what the question is here, but he says not just one bonus irregardless. Do you know what he's asking there, Todd?
No, I'm not sure. He might be asking, if you're not offering a payment plan, would you just have one additional bonus? And I answered that, really. I would, if you're not offering a payment plan, I would really spice up, really intensify the offer, right, with two bonuses if you're not going to offer. Remember, you've got, you're either going to miss out on a bonus and a payment plan, like an inexpensive option that you won't see any other time or anywhere else, or you're going to miss out on two bonuses. But if it's just one bonus, and if that bonus isn't really, especially if that bonus isn't really sweet, like it's not really great, then you're not, the urgency isn't there, right? Then, in other words, there's not this, fear of missing out so much because it's only one bonus. Does that make sense, David?
Yep, it totally does. And Neil's asked a general question, but I'm gonna get to the questions as it pertains to the intensification series first, and then we'll see if we can circle back with his general question. But so Edward asked, what if we're still in the beta phase of our product creation process and lacking proof testimonials for what we are marketing?
Yeah, so this is a common question, right? And everybody starts out with, initially when you're selling, marketing and selling a product for the first time. What I would look for is, initially, I would look for a couple things. I would try to dig up a couple things. So number one, depending on what it is that you are selling, you can find general proof. Like, in other words, if I wanted to, like way back, I think when I when I was first starting many moons ago. Let me see. And I was marketing and selling stuff to massage therapists. I would include statements from other experts about the value of direct response marketing. So even though it wasn't proof of like proof from a customer, it wasn't a customer story necessarily, but I incorporated, like if I was selling a program to massage therapists on how to grow their practice using direct response marketing, or my take on direct response marketing, and I didn't have customer testimonials, I would bring in quotes and blurbs from others that talked about the value of direct response marketing. So I wasn't stealing testimonials from somebody else, but if Dan Kennedy said something, Jay Abraham said something, Gary Halbert said something, Clayton Makepeace said something, I would take something from them and I would expand on you know what it is that that they've said. The other thing that you can do, and it's certainly not nearly as powerful, and it really doesn't have a place in the intensification sequence, but it certainly has a place in your marketing, is anything that somebody says about you. If you have a blog and you publish content and somebody says that, wow, that was a gem. I used to, years ago, when I started, again, with massage therapists, so going back, you know, over 15 years now, I generated testimonials just about the free newsletter that I sent out. And so, right, like even with free content, if somebody's like, hey, I took that one tip you shared last week, and man, I can't believe how, you know, how my clients responded, that I used in marketing. And so the other thing that you can do is you can do kind of a preliminary offer before the beta offer, where you give people free access in exchange for honest feedback on the product, right? And so what you're doing is you're giving it away for free to generate, you know, testimonials, proof, evidence, that sort of thing. And so you got to be strategic about it. Make
All
sense,
right,
David?
very cool. Yep, sure does. So Steve, how's it going, Steve? Steve asked a question. It's like a tactical question. Everything that we were doing, he noticed that was in Fusion. Can we do the same type of process? Can we work through it with ClickFunnels or other type of autoresponders?
So if Steve is using the built-in email platform inside of ClickFunnels, he can do it with Deadline Funnel. Yes, we also use ClickFunnels, Steve, but we don't use the CRM within ClickFunnels. We use Infusionsoft. But yes, you can do it with Deadline Funnel.
Awesome. All right. Austin says, do you do the segmentation during the opt-in of asking for email or in a later portion of the funnel?
So if you're going to use segmentation, I would use the simple segmentation like our buddy Ryan Levesque teaches right on the front end on the opt-in. You know, I resisted that for years. Ryan was telling me to do that for years. Like I remember when Ryan was a young buck, and I interviewed him. You could still probably find the video on YouTube. So funny, actually. And I resisted it because of fear of adding friction to the opt-in process and reducing our opt-in rate. But the reality is that it didn't. We started using it with the launch of the E5 Camp Masterclass earlier this year, and it was one of the highest opt-in rates that we had. And so just a simple question. We gave 3 options. Some people give 3 to 5 options, and then you generate the opt-in. That's the better way to do it. But you can still do it on the back end as well. Like we segment people based on links that they click, right? Even if we're sending out content, like we tag them as having an interest in a certain topic, so we can use that later on. But I would certainly recommend that you do it on the front.
Very cool. All right. JM says, don't we get a ton of unsubscribes in sending those emails, the intensification emails?
Yeah, it's a great question. So no, I wouldn't say that we get a ton of unsubscribes. I think that our average is probably lower than industry standard. But the thing to remember, and this is really interesting to think about, and you've heard me say this before, David, is that like I'm not in the business of reducing unsubscribes. I'm in the business of delivering value by generating sales. And so like the answer is, would you be willing to double your unsubscribes if you doubled your sales? I certainly hope the answer should be absolutely. And so I'm always looking for, just like you've heard me say before, David, I'm not in the business of reducing refunds, even though we have, like an extremely low refund rate. That's not my goal is not to reduce refunds. My goal is to increase sales. And if I double sales while increasing refunds by 25%, I'll do that all day long, every day. And so hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks for being so candid with that, man. So Austin then says evergreen scarcity. Most of the deadline timers I've seen are for real-time launches like E5 Camp Masterclass. Do we still use a countdown now that it is evergreen, and does Deadline Funnel offer evergreen? FYI, like the idea of countdown on the payment plan.
Yeah, that's actually the only reason why I would use Deadline Funnel is for evergreen campaigns. So if you're doing a live launch, you don't need Deadline Funnel. You can just use a built-in timer and just change the pages over. But what Deadline Funnel allows you to do is Deadline Funnel allows you to have real-time deadlines that are dynamically populated for every prospect. So, like for example, if you wanted to run a 4-day if you wanted to run a 4-day or 3-day payment plan for every person at the end of your marketing campaign, like I showed you in the intensification sequence, and you had an evergreen campaign, well, really the only way to do it with integrity is to do it with something like Deadline Funnel, because it will automatically populate a date. Like if you want to give a 4-day deadline, what happens with Deadline Funnel is once somebody gets to the payment plan portion, let's say, of the intensification sequence, it will create a date on the fly 4 days from now for that individual, and it'll do that every time a new prospect hits that point. It'll generate that date, and that date is tied with the countdown timer. And so what that means is that it's not just a matter of refreshing the page or going on to a different device. The link, the access to the page is actually tied to the date that is dynamically created by Deadline Funnel. That's why I like it so much.
Very cool. Edward asks that you mentioned how you don't like keeping emails the same and you like to change it up. And he noticed, however, that your picture is on the top of most all the emails that we send out. And
yeah. Yeah, so what I meant by that, and that's great, and to tell you the truth, right, to be candid, I think we're gonna start to test my picture and not my picture at the top, because to be honest with you, I don't really know. I don't know if there's value in that, to be honest with you. But what I meant by that, changing the emails, not keeping the emails the same, was not changing my own emails, but when I said like that image, I wanted it to be different. I want it to look different. I want it to be different from what they typically see from everybody else. See, there's something that I learned from Bill Bonner, the founder of Agora. It's something that I talked about in the E5 Camp Masterclass, and it's this idea of avoiding the categorical imperative. And that's a fancy way of saying that you don't want your stuff to automatically trigger this, I know what that is. That's a promotion. Boom, I'm going to put it in this box right over here, like mentally with your prospects. And so if everything that they get, if every time a prospect gets an email and they see a clickable video image in there, it's got a certain look and feel to it, well, then the moment that, if they've had a bad experience with that, if they've clicked over to other people's videos and they've been garbage or hypey or just pure hardcore sales pitch, well, now if my stuff looks like that, it triggers that categorical imperative in their mind, and now it's put through this filter of, oh, I know what that is, I know what's coming next, right? And so I like my stuff to look different. It's why even when we design certain pages, right, like if there is a template that everybody or lots of people in the marketplace are using, I stay away from that. I go in the opposite direction because I don't want to trigger that categorical imperative with our prospects.
Very cool. All right, we've got Brian, and Brian says, Todd, if you launch offers over and over to your list like we do, as well as having evergreen customer acquisition funnels, do you need to mix it up to keep engagement and sales high?
I'm not sure what he means by mix it up. Mix what up? I think that Like here's the reality, Brian, that if you constantly have offers out there, different offers out there, and you're marketing, you're not just selling, right? You're educating prospects in a way that leads them to want the product or service, then what you're doing sounds great. Like I think, like you should be marketing over and over. You should have offers, constant offers. The key is that you're not just selling and hammering them with a sales pitch, but you're marketing, right? Because the marketing itself is valuable. It's when you're only selling and hardcore pitching that you're going to burn out your list.
Very cool. All right. Leslie says, what are the best deadline times for different holidays, or if we know of any? For example, the holidays are coming in. Is there a deadline that we found, Todd, that works best before the 25th or January 1st or, say, January 4th, something like that?
Well, I'm not sure if she's asking about those particular dates or how long the countdown should be. So I would tell you that, I would typically I would not go more than 10 days. And there's not a hard and fast rule, but I typically wouldn't go more than 10 days, and I wouldn't introduce the countdown timer until no more than 48 hours before. Like, if you introduce the countdown timer 7 days out, let's just say, from the deadline, it almost, I would go as far as to say that it conveys the complete opposite. If you see a countdown timer and it says 7 days, or 6 days and 21 hours, 52 minutes, or whatever it is, it gives me the feeling that I still have a whole bunch of time. And so that's not, you can have a 7-10 day deadline, but just don't introduce the deadline, the countdown timer until the last 24 to 48 hours.
Very cool. All right. Terry, how's it going, Terry? Terry says, do you do any additional segmentation in your email sequences based on whether or not people open or don't open the emails and their behaviors?
Yes, we do that in absolutely. We do that in most of our campaigns. That's a different topic for a different day, but absolutely. When you have a tool like Infusionsoft or ActiveCampaign or Drip, it's crazy not to follow up with people based on their behavior. That's something that actually I taught in the original MFA coaching program 5 years ago, this idea that, like, especially when we run multi-part video sequences, sequence campaigns, we're moving people through the campaign based on their consumption and interaction with the content, not simply in a linear campaign. So, Terry, absolutely.
Very cool. All right. Our buddy Pete says, is this process used for both the front end and also the back end offers, Todd? Yes.
Yes, the only difference for us between typically in a campaign design between the front end and the back end is typically the back end doesn't have upsells. Right, so cool. the purpose of the upsell sequence, upsell add-on offer sequence is to really increase average transaction amount to be able to subsidize the cost of customer acquisition. On the back end, we subsidize the cost already. So the back end, that's the only difference. So the answer is yes.
Okay, and then Pete says, can you use action sets in Infusion to change the link in an email a certain amount of days later?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. That is a Teddy question, but I'm not sure why you would want to do that. Meaning, like, look, one thing you can't do is you can. So, yeah, that's a Teddy question. That goes beyond the scope of this. But you can, if you're. Yes, you can. You can change. Yeah, it's a Teddy question. It goes beyond the scope of this, but I'm not sure why you would want to do that. If you're using a tool like Deadline Funnel for your deadlines and your countdowns and your intensification sequence, you won't need to change the link. Once the date is passed, and there's no access.
Got it. All right. Austin says keep the pickup. When he sees it, it gets him all warm inside, knowing that some good stuff is coming. So keep the pickup.
Nice. I dig it. I like it. Thank you, Austin.
All right. So Terry's there's I guess end of Terry's question, which is about the 9 specifically in terms of further segmentation or not. So specifically about these 9, is there further segmentation that we do with these 9 emails that go out?
No, the only segmentation that we will do is not with all 9, but is with the additional bonuses. So if we're segmenting people, if we're using any kind of buckets, then the only segmentation that occurs is with those emails, the emails that go out for the additional bonuses. Other than that, we typically don't segment during the intensification sequence, or the offer sequence for that matter.
All right. So I see a bunch of general questions in here, Todd. I don't know, because we're here at 1 o'clock and we're an hour in. Do you want to possibly handle a couple of these general questions, or do you want to handle them in the Slack community? What would you prefer?
Send them to me, Slack them to me, and then I'll answer them inside the Slack community. I'll do an audio just to keep this focused on the intensification sequence today. So send me whatever general questions that weren't related to the intensification sequence, and then I'll just post an audio response for each inside the Slack community. But this is one of those things, I'll end it with this since we're at 1 o'clock. Like, this is one of those things that, man, like, you take this and you add this on the end of every campaign, and you will make more money, right? Like, and don't overthink it. Don't worry about like trying to nail it perfectly. Like, that's not what it's about. Don't worry about trying to nail. There is no perfect, right? There is no perfect. So don't worry about like, well, what if I'm not sure if the bonus is good enough, or I'm not sure if my customer stories aren't perfect. Don't forget that. Don't worry about nailing it. The beauty of what it is that we do is you can always go back and improve over time. But I promise you, if you get an intensification sequence, you put an intensification sequence on the end of your campaigns, you will make more money. Don't worry about sending too many emails. Don't worry about nailing it. Put this on the end and you will make more money.
Awesome. I like the sound of that, Todd. That sounds like something everybody should be taking advantage of. So I really appreciate your time today, man. Thank you for hopping on here with us and giving us some good knowledge on the intensification series, man. So thank you, everybody, for hopping on with us today. And I look forward to seeing everybody in the Slack. If you have any questions, I've copied a couple of the general questions. I'm going to post them in Slack for Todd. But if I've missed them, just let me know inside Slack, and we'll get Todd to answer them for you. So other than that, I'm good to go. Todd, are you good?
I'm good, man, and I'm pumped. By the way, we've got an incredible set of trainings coming your way. Like, we've invested a bunch of money in new audio, video equipment, screens, cameras, like. And the topics that we've got coming are just off the freaking charts. And so stay tuned. Keep your eyes glued. You're not going to want to miss a single second of it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Todd, and thank you.